Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. This is the only podcast where I've covered every episode of the Sunbelt cartoon, the DIC, even Extreme, and every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel. And this week, we've got another edition of You on Joe. That's right, you, the G.I. Joe fan. You love America's favorite fighting team. You listen to all the podcasts. You collect all the modern toys. You collect all the old toys. Well, I want you to be the star of this show. Whatever it is that you love about it. Is it a character? Is it an episode? Is it the cartoons? Is it the comics? Is it the movies? Whatever it is, that's what we want to discuss and get into the nitty-gritty details. So if you want to participate and be a guest, it's super, super easy. Please reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Joe on Joe Pod, or you can send an email to me at joeonjoepod@gmail.com and let me know what topic you'd like to cover. The more specific, the better. I will work with you and we will figure out a wonderfully fun, easy topic. We record over Zoom, super easy, and then an hour later you'll be a superstar in the G.I. Joe community. That is how this works. Now, while you are online, please give me a rate and review on your podcast app. That is super easy and it helps grow the show. I've been seeing a lot of new listeners and I appreciate it. Or if you're so inclined, you can also visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod. That helps keep the show running as well. And finally, we have a great sponsor. They talk about movies. They talk about meals. They are the Movies and a Meal podcast.
In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies and a Meal podcast. The Movies and a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews, they do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies and a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies and a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too.
Before we get into this week's show with our amazing guest, Yorktown Joe, I want to hit a couple pieces of business for this episode. I have read the Duke comic book since we recorded this, and I love it. Yorktown and we talked about it, but I had not yet read it at the time of recording, so you're going to hear me not have a lot to say about it. The problem has now been solved, and I am on board. I think it's great. I think it's an awesome start. I think it's, I love it. I think it's different enough to differentiate itself from the standard G.I. Joe universe, which is necessary if you're running two different universes. I'm on board. Now, you can also, the second piece of business is listen at the end of today's episode. So don't just tune off when you hear me sign off, because Yorktown Joe was awesome enough to read one of his short stories. It features Recondo. So that is included as a nice extra at the end of this episode for all of you to listen to. It's about 5 minutes long, I think, 4 minutes maybe. And finally, I want to give a special shout out to a friend of mine's podcast. This is the podcast called Friday the 13th, the series, ? And it comes from host Robert Romero and his partner in crime, Hill Street. Robert's a pal, and he's recently launched this episode by episode look into the underrated Friday the 13th TV show from the late 80s. I think it's like 88, 89, maybe 87. And there is a big crossover between horror fans and G.I. Joe fans. I know there are. So if you're into horror, podcasts, give his show a listen. You can find them on all the major podcast platforms. Tell them Joe on Joe sent you. And and learn a little bit more about Friday the 13th, the series. Now, I said that Yorktown Joe is amazing because, and I absolutely mean this next sentence, I don't know any other guest that has done as much research as he does. This is his second time visiting the show, and every time he's on, I leave smarter than before, and I hang up and I turn to my wife and I go, Yorktown Joe's awesome. He does all the research and legwork for me. He's so prepared. It's such a great guest, and I love it. And you guys know me. I hate doing research for the show. I'm all about the heart. So his combination, all that deep research and all this heart, stop it. You can find Yorktown on Twitter. He's at Yorktown Joe. He's a super nice guy. He's got a huge passion for G.I. Joe. And this week, he brought that to bear on one of my quiet favorites, Recondo. We talk about the toy. We talk about his appearance on the cartoon, the generational versions of his figure, and how we'd love to see him utilized in the bigger, more modern picture. One other piece of business here. I did double check after the show, and I actually never did get me an original Recondo. I don't have one. So I'm going to head to eBay right now and snap one up before all of you hear this and think, man, Recondo was amazing. I need to get an old school Recondo too, and then you drive the prices up. So I'm getting this the night before it drops to save me some money. Now sit back and enjoy my chat with Yorktown Joe.
Thank you, and thank you, Walmart. Thank you, Walmart.
Amazing. So what do we got here? We got Walmart just delivered Yorktown Joe some stuff, and we got Shadow Tracker and who's the other one?
Grunt.
Oh,
Grunt.
Oh, yeah. Grunt
I missed out on him when everyone was like, Target had them. Like if you were awake at like 2 or 3 in the morning, you could get them for $11.99, and I was like, not awake. Yeah. I actually thought about it, and then I said, I'm going to be away. I'm not going to be there. Is it going to sit on the front step for 3 or 4 days? That's not probably good. And then I said, well, I'll think about it in the morning, and they were all gone. And I said, all right, well, I'll wait for another sale. And then I said, maybe there's no more sales coming. I'll just that's kind of a figure though. That's mainline. You can get them wherever.
That's great. I went the route. I'm for a few years. Obviously, I made the choice a few years ago to go the route of like paying for Hasbro Pulse. So and getting them when they come out. So I know I'm paying a little bit more, but that's for the convenience of not doing that. Like hustling for the sales and watching what's available where and having to track what available when. So it absolutely costs me more money in the long run, but it's one of those things of like just to not have to sweat it out. There's so many other things in life that I'm trying to sweat out and get it, like when's this dropping? And like I missed G.I. Joe 302, like I wasn't at the shop last week, so I gotta, and, it was sold out, and so like I gotta grab 302. What's that?
Do you need a copy?
No. I'll find one.
I was going to say, I know my LCS. I just was there to pick up Duke yesterday. Yeah. And I saw they still had a couple 302s. I think they had 2.
I'm sure they're to be had. I'm trying out a new joint, and I haven't signed up for anything yet. And they just didn't have 302. So I'm in that limbo. But I did pick up Duke #1. However, I have not had a chance to read it. But your top note thought, Joe. What are your top note thoughts on it?
I see. This is why I was like, I can talk to somebody because I don't know. I write little mini reviews, just like my thoughts on it.
Okay.
And I post those, and somebody reposts them somewhere. One of my online friends reposts them somewhere. But I am hesitant because it says I should. If you looked at the back of it. It specifically says on the back of it, it's like a classified statement. The back of the issue on the back of the cover,
and it says what? Like, don't talk about it.
You can read what it says. Yeah, it says don't. It says like the first rule of Duke is don't talk about Duke.
Contents of this book is confidential. Oh wow. Oh yeah. Literally, it was sitting in my. I got it yesterday. Okay. So okay. Well then
I could talk to you about it. I will just say it has. It's one of the great things about G.I. Joe is I don't feel offended if somebody else takes another take on something.
Yeah.
But like, for example, let's turn back the clock to the 80s sometime, early 80s, middle 80s, whenever it is.
Sure.
Let's say you're at your house and you're setting up your Joes and Cobras in an adventure. And I'm at my house setting up my Joes and Cobras in an adventure. And you might say, I saw something in the comics and I'm going to have something similar to that. And I saw something on a cartoon and I have something similar to that. And Johnny down the street has never seen the cartoon or the comic, and he's just got the toys, and he's got his own little thing going on. None of our little worlds impact somebody else's world, and we can just say, hey, Joe Slepsky's ideas, that was cool. He had a cool little adventure there.
Yeah.
Yorktown Joe's adventure, that was pretty cool. But that doesn't impact your world, or shouldn't impact your ability or your blood pressure,
Right.
or your online keyboard.
Oh,
So
I
this
so
is what
agree.
I'm saying.
100%.
If there's something that's like a movie or a cartoon, if it's not your jam, keep her moving. It's fine. It's somebody's jam, and we're talking about Joe's. You got more toys.
You're so right.
Good.
You're so right. You're so right. And and that's not to cut off any, valid criticism. And again, I haven't read the issue, so whatever. But it's not to cut off anyone's valid criticism of a project, whether it's a comic or a movie or whatever. But there is always something for everyone. And as Joe, I don't see it a lot, to be fair. But when I see a Joe fan or any kind of Joe talk, like that's not my Joe's, or my Joe's wouldn't do that. G.I. Joe is, and He-Man too, to a point, but G.I. Joe really was the start of, when everyone talks about multiverse stuff, not saying it explicitly, although obviously Worlds Without End, but showing it, literally displaying it by having the figures, the cartoon, and the comic book all concurrent, all huge, all at the same time. So we were mentally grasping these three different continuities, one your own, one the TV, for maybe a little younger crowd, and one the comic named for just a slightly older crowd, but still young. And I know for me, that taught me, just burned into my brain the idea of different realities without naming it. It wasn't, running around 1986 going, I know, although technically I did read Crisis, but it really was. So fast forward to the idea of, oh, that's not what I grew up with, or I don't like it because it's different. Nah. There may be reasons. Maybe you don't like the art style. Maybe you don't like this. Maybe you don't like that.
Sure.
But a Joe fan should be wide open to different takes and different interpretations on the team. And maybe some are better than others. Maybe some work better than others. Certainly. The Paul Aller book I really liked a lot. I didn't think it worked well on the comic page because it was hard to distinguish who was who. And I mean that in a real way of like, when you draw a comic where everyone's in these, like the more urban camo, the more realistic civilian garb, it's just harder to tell what characters are doing what versus a more superhero-esque costume approach. So like that style, I liked the story a lot. The visually didn't work for me. And I just using that as an example.
I will say, if you're my LCS guy said, just to tell you, I haven't read it yet, but I don't think this fits in with because he knows I'm a real American hero guy.
Yeah.
When he finds back issues, he's like, here, Joe, check these out before I put them, sticker them, and price them and whatever.
That's a good local
see if there's
comic
something
shop.
that you're missing. And so he's good. And so I started with the Void Rivals and the Transformers, and I have old Marvel Transformers, but I never really got into it. I mean, I got them because I was, when you're at the spinner rack and you're like, oh, well, there's G.I. Joe, or, oh, there isn't a G.I. Joe. Oh, there's a Transformers. I'll grab that. And so I had some, and I just never really caught on. I watched the cartoon pretty faithfully, but I couldn't tell you what series was what or any of that. I could tell you the Transformers movie because that's very...
Oh, yeah.
That has the very harsh point that it has embedded in all of our minds. But as far as G.I. Joe, obviously G.I. Joe is my main thing. Transformers, there's issues 1, 2, and 3 out. And if you are getting to Duke, I would say you should probably read 2 and 3 and then Duke.
Oh, interesting. I've read
that's
one.
Just advice.
Yeah, I've read 1 and 2, and I've read like up to, I think I've read 4 issues of Void Rivals so far.
The Void Rivals, I haven't.
After the introduction, it's kind of gone off on its own thing.
Yeah. The Void Rivals has like cameo appearances, like
the Quintessa.
Like sometimes you like if you talk to for example, if you're talking to Morgan Lofting or something, and you have her do an intro for you or something, it has some cameos of Transformers, but it
Yeah.
isn't like main thing of Transformers. So I think it's an interesting story on its own.
Yeah,
But
I'm excited to read
another
it.
thing.
I'm excited to read it. But that's not what we're here to talk today about, though.
No, we better
Yorktown
get on
Joe.
to Recondo.
We're here to talk,
You probably
and
got other things to do.
yeah, and thank you so much for being patient with me. I've said many times, I think a lot of podcasters feel this way. Scheduling interviews is the bane of our existence. So when life gets busy and life gets tough, I'll turtle and do a lot of Joe and Joe Illustrateds. So usually, actually, listeners, yeah, when you see me doing a lot of Joe and Joe Illustrateds, it's usually because life is busy. But I'm so happy you reached out this week because we're talking Recondo, and I'm a big fan. I think he's one of those characters that should have gotten a higher profile than he did, but I know that when people love him, they love him. So Yorktown, what about Recondo made you reach out and say, that's who I want to talk about on You on Joe?
All right. So lots of times people, thank you, Joe. I appreciate being here. I really, really do appreciate the conversation. Recondo, when people ask, who's your favorite Joe? Who's your favorite Cobra? I don't just default to Snake Eyes like a significant, and that's great.
Like me.
People, Snake Eyes, I like Snake Eyes a lot. So Snake Eyes is not, I'm just saying, if you're going to go for something that's a little bit out there, but a little bit military realistic, Recondo's the guy. And 84 was a good year. If you say what Cobra is your favorite Cobra, Firefly. And I'll usually alternate between certainly Recondo or Firefly for a Yorktown Joe avatar. If you see avatars on any of the socials, they're one or the other of those two.
Mm-hmm.
And I just stick with that because you can have a little variety, but those are some good things. I found out later on, we'll get to that part of the conversation, but I liked Recondo. He looked military, he looked tough, he was fun, he was a fun action figure. This is not my listeners, you can just envision not a fully carded figure, but a reclamshelled figure with a little file card on the back here that I got from a friend online. This is not my original Recondo. We'll talk about my original Recondo. He had
real quick. Let's take a quick diversion from that. Hold that back up. I like that. I feel like I've seen this before, but listeners, if you're not familiar with this, it is a repro card back, but not in any way to try to fool or replicate anyone. It's just got the starburst in the middle, or bomb burst in the middle, I guess, and then it's got a open plastic clamshell placed for you to put your 3 3/4 figure in the middle. So it's a way to store and display your vintage 3 3/4, in that file card or in that original card format. And then it looks like it's got a little hanger on the top too, so you can hang them on the wall. And then on the back, it looks like you slid the actual original file card into it, so just to store it with it. I like that a lot. Do you do? And again, maybe this is super popular. I just, for some reason, I haven't seen a lot of these. Like, do you get that card back online? Like, is there someone we can give a shout out to that makes those?
I got that from a friend from Facebook. And I'm not sure if he's got a special name on there. It says Terry Ruin, like RUIN. And Terry's great. He has his own YouTube channel as well. So
great.
That's
and did he do?
He sells the clamshell separately, and if you want a background that has like Tiger Force or something with Cobra like jumping out at it, he has those, and he has them for the classified figures as well. So
that's awesome.
It's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool.
It really is. Again, if everyone listening is like how long have you had that? Like, is that he's been doing that for a while, or?
I think he's been doing it for a couple of years at least.
Okay.
Probably during the last few years
pandemic,
when things were going on, right? Exactly.
It's great because it pops and I really like it. So Terry Ruin, whoever you are, God bless you, because that looks awesome, and it looks like a perfect way to showcase your stuff. And what I really like about it is it's the product he's putting out there isn't trying to completely replicate the old card back. So so there's no risk of fraud. There's no risk of people fraudulently selling or whatever. it is taking the style, the look, and the feel of it and putting your guy right up front and center on it. I love it.
It's a little more compact and it's resealable, which I think that would be a benefit if we had resealable packaging for collectibles. Not because, you wouldn't want to pull something out, beat it up, and then put it back on a clamshell and try to sell it to somebody else as minty fresh. But that's a thing for.
That's great. I can picture a whole wall full of those. Us just lining our wall with those, or with our favorite teams, or a grid of 9, something like that, and just swapping out your favorite guys whenever you feel like it. I love that he would do like Night Force and probably other factions as well, Cobra and things like that. That is a great idea. I like it. Now I got to clear a wall out to do it.
Absolutely. So let's get on to
do it. Let's talk his file card. Yeah,
file card, right?
Yeah.
The Jungle Trooper, codename Recondo, file name Leclerc. Daniel M.
Bum, bum, bum.
You don't need to know the serial number because nobody cares about the serial number. His primary military specialty is infantry.
I always thought that was a social security number, though.
His mother's maiden name, if anybody is needing that, and the last 3 digits on the back of his Visa card. No, none of those things are on. Primary military specialty, infantry. Secondary military specialty, intelligence. Always good.
Always good. Birthplace. Yeah, I was going to say, I think I stepped on your birthplace.
Wheaton, Wisconsin, grade E4. Now, Wheaton, Wisconsin, interestingly, is just abutting right next to the city of Eau Claire, Wisconsin,
where my family is from.
Exactly. And we've had a conversation in a previous episode, I think on extreme before when I was with you in a previous time. But Wheaton is right next to that. Recondo hates the cold. He loves hauling a rucksack through the bush and sweating through his camis. When he's in the jungle, he owns it. Anybody else is trespassing. Cadre member at Jungle Warfare Training Center, qualified expert, M16, Swedish K, grease gun, M1911, A1, auto pistol, M79, grenade launcher. A jungle is like some single gigantic hostile organism. It can sense when you fear or hate it, and it is wholly without mercy. When Recondo steps into a jungle, it sings to him like a mother, soothing a troubled child. So that is his background. And as you mentioned before, I actually live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I have liked Recondo well before I ended up in that. But when you look at the name, Daniel Leclerc, somebody in Pawtucket, Rhode Island back in the day was certainly making a play on words there. They looked at the map, they saw there was Eau Claire, and they moved around nearby there.
Well, who am I thinking of? Because wasn't Larry doing a lot of that? And I think because one of the figures, and I'm sorry for my brain melting, but there's a fake city that map makers use to, we talked about this on the show once. Map makers sometimes they'll slip in like a fake city to kind of copyright the map they make. And I don't think it was done as like, I think
you're thinking of Road Pig.
Is that
Go Blue, Michigan?
That's it.
Go Blue, Michigan.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
I got your memory back for you.
Right, that's exactly it. And that Larry chose that. So I would think that Larry, in trying to make a Wisconsin guy, would have been inspired by Eau Claire. Absolutely. I do love that this is again one of those characters that is the opposite. Like was it Frostbite, where he's from Texas, but he hates the heat, loves to live in the cold. In this case, he's a jungle trooper from Wisconsin, hard to get colder than Wisconsin, and hates it and loves to live in the jungle.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, if you find something that's the beautiful part about our country, you are free to move about the country. So that's and as you have moved, you've been in the Midwest.
Oh, sure.
On the coast, and you've been in different places. And and it's a good thing that we can move. So.
And Daniel moved out of the country. Went to live with was it the Tucaros? Is that the
Tucaros?
Yeah, the Tucaros. Yes. Went to live with the Tucaros.
So he hung out in Sierra Gordo. Yes, and that brings us into the comic book realm of Recondo. We talked about Recondo, the action figure, and his background there. We met Recondo a few times in the comics, but I think the most iconic was in that, I believe it was Marvel 38, 39. And he was with the Tucaros, and they were rescuing Dr. Burkhart a second time from the jungle, and he led a team with the Tucaros and some Joes to rescue Dr. Burkhart a second time.
For
so
sure.
I always have thought it was heroic. There was a scene where Stalker was aghast when he saw a few, I don't know if they were Cobras or Rebels or whatever, knocked out, and Dr. Burkhart was free, and he said, "You used your knife?" And
they weren't knocked out,
to cut
Joe.
her ropes, to cut her ropes, right? So later on, some snipers took out some of the Tucaros, and I think he used his knife for a different purpose, but that was off panel.
Yeah.
We can't confirm or deny, other than a couple of snipers' Dragunovs got dropped into the river as an offering, and
it's a great moment.
So we see Recondo. Recondo's a little more edgy. Recondo's not.
He's way
Batman. Let's haul him off to Arkham, and they could fight another day.
He's way edgy.
Finished the job all the way.
He's way edgy, and he really introduced the idea for me as a young reader of the satellite G.I. Joe member, right? So Snake Eye's edgy, but he's always there. He's part of the team. Like, hey, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. This remote dude showing up, who's edgy and qualified and good, but he's not hanging out at the pit. You know, he's not seeing him. He's been off in a jungle he's probably been a member of the team for years and doing his thing. We've just now met him. And that was a new thing, you know, like when Duke and Roadblock joined, they were new, but they were new to join the team. You know, yeah, they were in the military before, but they weren't, you know, they were new to this is, oh no, we're going to meet up with our friend Recondo. Oh yeah, he's a Joe. He's out here, and he's not going to come back with us. He's going to go back into the bush. You know, I thought that was great. It's a great concept. They've it's funny. Last week we did the Battle Action Force Annual '89, and the story there was Havoc in the Outback, and they do the same trick with Outback in that one as well, where he was just living in the Australian Outback, and you know, he's off on his own, doing his own thing, looking for trouble. And the Joes are like, all right, call us if you find anything. You know, or the Action Force, rather. So that was a really neat and different thing about Recondo that I wasn't exposed to before.
And besides the comics, he was also appeared quite a bit in the Sunbow episodes of the cartoon as well. Probably his most famous one that most people remember him from is Jungle Trap, where they're working with Dr. Shakur, and they're going through all these things, and he's able to save rock and roll from dispatching a rhinoceros in a most hideous way, which would not be appropriate for a children's cartoon. He was able to get through a lot of traps. Fortunately, Duke didn't make it through all the traps, but that's always Duke's shtick, is to be caught in a trap. So, but Recondo got him.
That's why he's the only Joe member they gave the tracer ring to. They have tracer ring technology, but only Duke gets it. Yeah, because we know you're going to get in trouble, Duke. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Recondo was also I made a note. Recondo was in another episode in I think it's either the Siren Spell or Spell of the Siren. I'm not sure, but that's the one where Baroness has the conch shell, and she's turning all the males of both Cobra and Joe to her bidding. Recondo's one of the few that escapes that, and he's riding around. Ironically enough, he's riding around in Dragonfly with Wild Bill, and they're trying. They
the Hat Brigade.
Work with Zaymot, free everybody, and everything turns out all right in the end.
Yeah,
of course,
they're the good-looking Hat Brigade and the Mustache Brigade, which we shouldn't go any further without talking about those two things. Recondo is in the top 3 all-time G.I. Joe mustaches, and in the top,
agreed,
I want to say top 2 all-time G.I. Joe headgear.
Yes.
Show me a better headgear. I mean, it's anything else is debatable. It's between Recondo and anyone else. That side flipped up hat, I think do they call it a bush hat? I think that's the name of it.
Very popular with the Anzac Australian forces.
Yeah. Which ties into the Action Force stuff where we were learning over there. They made him from Melbourne. Instead of, they changed all the nationalities of everybody. But him specifically, they said, no, he's Australian, which makes total sense to what he looks like. Yeah, he had such a great, unique look. His gun, it was so unique because it was wrapped up in camo. Oh, there it is. The rifle. Yep. So good. And a simple rucksack backpack. Just nice design on the figure. But that hat and that mustache, chef's kiss, man.
And that probably is why there was problems back in the day when they were going from standard editions to Tiger Force editions, and they said, all right, we've got this Tiger Force Tigerfly helicopter. All right, it's yellow and black. That's great. So who's the pilot? It's the guy with the sweet mustache and the sweet hat. Well, that didn't that narrowed it down, and somebody looking at the item said, this guy? Sure, why not? And so then Recondo suddenly went to helicopter school, evidently. So yes.
Do you genuinely think that's it was a mix-up? That's why he was the pilot on the Tigerfly?
I can neither confirm nor deny my sources on that. I have no sources. I just made that up.
I like that idea.
But that could be because from 84 to 88, do you think the same exact design people were doing this? Because I'm thinking new sculptors who were creating new characters that had never been before. They were still paving the way.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who were repurposing, repainting, reissuing, whatever you want to call that, I think those were probably a different group of people because they didn't have to be designers for that. They just had to say, hey, let's come up with another alternative paint scheme for those. But I'm thankful for all of those. Small, great, both any sizes, any shapes, any colors of Recondo. Really like Recondo. Now, I would probably be on the opposite end of your good friends from What's on Joe Mind. I know Joe Colton cosplay. She is anti-Recondo. So next time you're on, yes, she's the opposite, polar spectrum opposite from me on Recondo. But she had a bad experience with a Recondo cosplayer, she tells us. So that could be the reason why she doesn't like Recondo. But why hold a poor example of a person dressing up like a character, hold that against the whole character? Come on.
Yeah, that seems hard. That seems hard.
Yeah, the comics, the toys, the cartoon, Recondo, he holds up, and he held up. He wasn't a goofball in any of them. He had an edge in some of them. He was competent in the cartoon. I think he succeeds in all of his missions. And like you said, it's good to have a satellite deployed force in other locations so that you don't have to say, well, we got to get everybody from the pit. We got to deploy from here. Make sure you bring some extra gas because we're flying all the way to South America.
You always got a man on the ground. He's like in a news organization, the foreign press reporters that basically never live in the U.S. They always travel from hotspot to hotspot, and they have their contacts in all the places to get the stories. That's kind of what Recondo is. Real quick on the Tigerfly stuff, the file card for Recondo, it looks like they did a match of what Wild Bill's file card picture was and painted over Recondo. They're in the exact. Have you ever noticed this? They're in the exact same pose, except Recondo's got he's got visibly a cockpit drawn over him, but they're really in the exact same pose. And it really, to me, it looks like they just took the Wild Bill one and painted over, at least to match the same style and format of the original Wild Bill file card. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying. Yes, and I have heard some sad stories about the repurposing of some of Hector Garrido, the late great Hector Garrido.
They absolutely did really paint over a lot of that
terrible
stuff.
Things that original, because back in the day, listeners, they didn't just have everything digital. So when we say back in the day, Joe and I are from a long, long time ago. We'll just say that. But somebody took a photograph of a painting. So just can you imagine this?
Yeah.
Somebody was commissioned as an artist. Hector Garrido was commissioned as an artist. He painted a painting that someone then took a picture with a 35 millimeter camera and then developed that film and then got that to a factory somewhere to turn into card art that we can all enjoy at a very affordable price. So I've heard some of those paintings were painted over. Somebody
Yeah.
actually painted over that. So the original art, which can you imagine what that would sell at in an auction? That, I mean,
Oh,
right, right, exactly. There's
ridiculous. It
people that
would be
would pay
ridiculous.
ridiculous
Yeah, it would
because
be
it would be the
ridiculous.
only one. It would be literally the one of a kind,
Yes.
and you'd have it.
Yes.
So, um, so yeah. But then to have gone over somebody else going over that, and I'm like Tiger Force as much as the next guy, but can you imagine just painting Tiger Force stuff over top of a beautiful painting?
No.
Oh,
No.
brutal.
No. Yeah, when I first heard that, I forget who it was. It was telling me it was one of our Joe experts on this show. I visibly went, what? They did what? Because I had no idea that anyone would be that silly. It really does blow my mind that even removing yourself from like, oh, sometimes you can't predict that things are going to be valuable, or what have you. But like, it was the 80s. There were already people talking about like film preservation, and collecting comic books was already a thing. Getting artwork back to the original comic book creators was already a thing. Like in the early 80s, that's when the big fight was. In the late 70s with Kirby and trying to get his, what I mean? The idea of somewhat of saying this stuff means something existed for at least a good 5 to 10 years. So that practice blows my mind.
It's an amazing thing, and I almost want to not believe it. Like I
Yeah.
feel like I'd be better off if that was not actually the case.
Yeah.
If that was, but
Makes you too sad to think about it.
Too many people have said that.
Yeah.
Makes me think that this actually did happen. So
yeah, no, I know it did happen.
Cool.
So now,
Yeah.
Recondo also, he was re-released in the Tiger Force was the Tiger Force was the last version we had with him until 2003, where he came out with a ghillie suit, and he had all kinds of accessories. They gave him a knife, shotgun, a rifle, 2 rifles, a different backpack, but a sweet ghillie suit. However, they got rid of his mustache and they got rid of his hat, which makes me think that figure was not originally meant to be Recondo.
Right. And I know exactly the figure you're talking about. It looked like he had like a Ranger or baseball style cap.
Yep. It looks more Duke.
Right, exactly. Or like something that they were going to repurpose and say, all right, this is you're getting into a country for a mission, but you're getting off the airport, you're getting off the airplane or jet or whatever, and you've got this hat on to keep your hair from going every which way, and also kind of cover over your face in case anybody's trying to spy on you. But they had, I think, a similar hat like that for Clutch or Double Clutch, if that was the case during that era. But yes, Recondo saw that was a more interesting iteration of
the
him.
the Valor Venom era. Yeah, I would comfortably say that's not, he wasn't designed from the ground up to be Recondo. I think that would be a comfortable assessment.
Agreed.
Yeah. Now the next version in 2005, though, he's got a very similar body, but he is painted tan to blend in. Well, I mean, sorry, they did a kind of a Night Force version in 2004, but then the 2005 one, he does have his mustache back, or at least a version of it, and he's got the hat back, and then the whole body is a little more jungle khaki looking, so that feels more jungle than the at least the 2004 one. 2003 does have jungle camo, to be fair.
Right.
So 2005 is like, they took the body, actually it is, they took the body from the 23, 24 one, and they said, let's actually make him look like Recondo, and there you go. Now 2009 really pops as far as a modern version of, he came for the Assault on Cobra Island box set. This really pops as far as someone saying, let's update the original Recondo.
Yes.
He's got
I didn't get that set, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
He looks really good.
Yes.
I'm referencing yojo.com on this. He looks really good as far as recapturing what that original Recondo looked like. facially, 100% clothing wise. Like, he's got a removable hat, removable holster. His backpack is similar. His rifle's spot on. So this Recondo really looks like they said, let's go back to the basics and make him look and make it pop. That works. It works really well for me. What about you?
Yes, I agreed. I think the mustache and the hat, yeah, the camouflage, whether it's dark or not, that does go back to something that was said. I believe it was. I can't remember if it was issue 38 or 39, but when they were rescuing Dr. Burkhart, they said one set of camis looks like another in the dark. So
Mm-hmm.
that
Oh, true.
really, realistically, he kind of lived that throughout his career. If he needed to have a different deco, he's still in. If he's having a night mission, he's going to be the same. He's going to have the hat turned to one side, and he's going to blend in.
Yeah. Now in 2010, we've got Pursuit of Cobra Recondo, and I like everything about this guy. They've given him like jungle traps. They've given him like, like with foot triggers and stuff, and he's got jungle axes and rifles, and he's got the hat and everything, except the bald head, which makes me think this is old man Recondo. So this is Recondo
Agreed.
after being in the Joes for 20 years. So I'm here for that. Not here for young Recondo. This is old man Recondo.
Right. And I would say that that is a great update and a new take on a figure where they've taken a figure, kept some core parts of the figure, and not strayed too far from that, but then also updated him for a new mission and a new era for that specific group and time. I think that was, I mean, the mask reminded me like this is something like, hey, he would have had that with the Takaros. They might have given that to him, and that may have been either a souvenir or something that
That's
he
wild.
had because of his relationship with them. So tying that back to to comics in the mid '80s on a figure like you said in 2010, that is wild. So
That's really good. Yeah. And then of the OG series, we end up in 2015. This is the convention exclusive, the Tiger Force Iron Grenadiers Recondo. Here's what I like about this. Figure wise, he looks good. Matches the original. I like that his accessories are multicolored because we don't see a lot of that in the other ones. I guess the vest and the backpack in the previous version we were talking about, but like his gun is multicolored. His they calling it his skirt, like his hat has stripes on it. I think it like that gun really works for me where it's got the black, the rifle itself is black and it's got the green wrapping. For some reason that really pops for me.
right, and having those little subtleties,
Mhm.
that's what shows that the designers actually care not just about the character, but about their craft and what they're doing to try to make something that does pop, as opposed to something that's just something from the '80s when it was all flat in one color.
Right, easy to produce. Yeah. Man, I like Recondo a lot. I'm trying to remember if I had him. I'm fairly positive I have him now in my collection. I don't have room to display, so my collection is in a box, nicely stored, but it's all in a box and it comes out every once in a while. And I'm trying to remember if I have Recondo. I don't know that I had him as a kid though. There's one of those. There's a couple of those dudes I've spoken of before, like Airborne was huge, where I loved him but never had him as a kid, but I loved the look of his figure, and I don't know why. I must have missed getting him. And I can't recall if I had Recondo. Do you remember when you got your first Recondo?
I'm trying to remember because there are some figures that I remember very distinctly, like the whole process of getting to the store, getting to the toy aisle, finding the figure that I was looking for. I've got a story of Destro for another day
Oh yeah.
that was like that. I don't remember distinctly, so I do know I received him and he was in 1984. I had him or I found him in the store and bought him myself. I'm not sure which, but I do remember he was my favorite walking around. I would bring him to friends' houses. They'd come over and play. I always made sure that I had Recondo. Let them use whatever other figures they wanted, but I had to have him. And I recall I was over and I just brought Recondo. I was like, that's fine. I don't need to bring a whole lot of stuff. He's got stuff. We'll just use his stuff. but I'll bring my Recondo. I don't think he had Recondo, so that was the thing. And we were having a great battle. He was very careful. I was very careful. Nobody was hurting anything, but he had a little brother,
Uh-oh.
so you know how the story's going to go. So so at the very end, one of the moms said, "Well, it's time to go." Probably my mom, because we were at their house. Time to go. You pack up your stuff, and I was getting ready to go, and my friend, his little brother, grabbed Recondo, and he was, they were having like, make your machine gun sounds and your missiles and your things blowing up and all that. He decided he would grab Recondo and throw him up.
Uh-oh.
He threw him all the way up in the air. My Recondo struck the ceiling and came back down, falling down. So you can only imagine, at least an 8-foot ceiling. I don't know, maybe it was higher than that, but you can just imagine what happened to the figure. We'll just go with a quote: "A waste is a terrible thing to waste."
Oh, no.
So we'll keep, a waste is a terrible thing to waste. So he still had the skirt part, but there was a missing part, and I don't. We don't need to say the word that rhymes with watch, but that was a terrible thing. We'll keep it on the up and up here for the listeners. And yes, so I think that happened in 1985, and I don't think he was on shelves anymore. So that was a double edged thing for me. It was my favorite character. He was busted. It wasn't my fault. If I broke off a figure's thumb, I figured something out. That was my fault. That was not.
Yeah, when someone else does the damage.
When somebody else does that,
oh.
and also the social part. This is my best friend. That's his little brother.
Yeah.
The moms are up there, and I was like, just biting my lip so I didn't cry and I didn't scream and I didn't punch the kid. And I was like, okay, you got to keep it under control here.
We're the same person. That's those are the moments in life when you need an adult to step in and do the right thing and say, well, you know what? We're going to replace this for you. We're going to get a new guy, instead of saying, just suck it up, blah, blah, blah. No, you need that. I got a few stories like that. And it's like,
I never said anything to them about it.
Yeah.
I let it go because the friendship was more important than the Recondo. But I'm telling you that story. I've been 40 years later, so there you go.
I've been on the other end too, man. I have, I remember one time we were at a party and they were riding go-karts, and sure enough, Oafy Joe gets on a go-kart and figures out a way to flip it and break it. And I'm just like, and I'm just like, man, what? So I've been on both sides of that equation. So the thing we learn is when you're a kid, things go wrong, and it's not the end of the world. And so a lot of times you need adults to step in and make sure that everyone realizes that it's not the end of the world, So it's good to have that perspective as you grow up, and hopefully impart that on the people below you. So one final thought on Recondo, and then we'll wrap this up, because this has been great. This has been great, Yorktown Joe. I think Recondo is on a very short list of characters that could absolutely get a Duke / Chuckles / solo series treatment in a comic book, where he's got
awesome.
Yeah, he's got enough of an interesting built-in background of a dude that travels the world, typically jungle, or outdoorsy settings, but he's a free agent doing his thing, and you could explore different cultures and different parts of the world, and real world stuff, kind of like they did with Chuckles, of saying he's just his own free agent and he's not tied to the real continuity of the everyday life of the pit, but he's off doing his thing. I think there's a real big space for Recondo in that, the kind of thing I think you could do something like that. Maybe with Shipwreck, although he's always been pretty tied close to the, but like Shipwreck might be a good character for that. Chuckles was perfect for that. That Cobra series was fabulous. What would you think about that? Would you like to see that kind of a Recondo series?
I would love to see that. I think that would be good. And the nice thing about that is you could have it be like just a 4-part series, which comic creators seem to be favoring. They don't have to try to get people to be involved in 300 plus issue series. Sure. They can say, hey, you might love this 300 issue thing, but maybe you could support 4 issues.
Yeah.
Maybe this would get you interested in something, and maybe you'll get you say, hey, that was a good experience. I'll do this character and have 4 issues on that. And I think that's a good marketing strategy for comic creators, because then they can tie that into a bigger continuity, a larger continuity, with rich and vibrant characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got that savage appeal, like we said, of, he's a dude that's not afraid, like the law of the jungle, literally, that they applied that to his character from the start. So I could see something like that being successful, and maybe make it a buddy book. Honestly, here you go. You make it a buddy book, him and Outback.
That would be a good story. Those two,
Yeah.
out and about. There would be some banter, but not enough banter that someone would have to tell the other one to be quiet. They would know when something was wrong, and both of them strike me as characters that when they would know if a twig snapped, whether a person was stepping on that or an animal or just the wind. They would know the difference between that because of their experience out in the sticks, as it were.
Totally. I love it. Well, Yorktown Joe, thank you so much for coming on today. I love this Recondo talk. This is what you and Joe is for, digging into these singular characters and talking about how much we love them. So I really appreciate you joining me today.
I appreciate the time as well, Joe. And some other time I'll record with you some Reader's Theater. No, actually not Reader's Theater. Fan fiction. I've got a 3 or 4 minute backstory of Recondo.
Oh!
So, unless you want it right now,
well,
you can separate that out as a separate segment. That's fine.
So Yorktown Joe, we're gonna wrap this up with some of your Recondo fan fiction. So listeners, stay tuned after our wrap up, and we'll hear a little bit of Yorktown Joe's creativity. What do you say to that, Joe?
Yo, Joe.
Awesome. Well, now you know more about Recondo, and Joeing is half the battle.
Wheaton, Wisconsin, February, several years in the past. Mrs. LeClaire asked her son, "Why didn't you bundle up and go out and play in the snow with the other boys, Daniel?" "It's too cold outside, Mom. Last time I was out, Bobby hit me in the face with a snowball." Daniel LeClaire tried to spend as little time outdoors during winter as possible. He shoveled the snow since it was his chore, but he dreamt of someplace warm, someplace far from Wheaton, Wisconsin. Daniel had grown up in the small town just north of Eau Claire and slightly west of Chippewa Falls. There was less than 2,000 people in town, but with the rural nature of the township, not everyone knew everyone else. People would know who you were, who your parents were, but not much more. They did not know each other's hopes and dreams. If they knew Daniel, they would know he hated the cold. He yearned for a warmer place to live. He had heard Arizona was nice, but also that it was dry. He wanted to live somewhere hot, H-O-T, hot. Someplace where the humidity wrapped itself around you like a warm blanket. When he was 10 years old, his parents went on vacation to Florida. It was tropical, and the sun shone brightly on Daniel's face. He beamed from ear to ear as the sun warmed his skin. He enjoyed the tingle of his skin as he began to perspire. "I wish we could live here," he told his parents. They laughed quietly, thinking that he wanted to be on vacation forever. Little did they know it was the warmth he desired. He enjoyed his vacation, but the dreary gray winter days in Wheaton seemed to drag on and on. Whether the groundhog saw his shadow or did not matter much in Wisconsin. 6 more weeks of winter meant a thaw in mid-March. To the residents of Wheaton, mid-March would be an early spring. In high school, Daniel was asked where he would go if he could travel and live somewhere else. He replied, "I would love to live in the jungle in Brazil." It was a unique answer. Several of his friends planned to go to the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire or the University of Wisconsin Stout in nearby Menominee, Wisconsin. But an Army recruiter had caught Daniel's attention with the possibility of serving someplace warmer and enticing education benefits. "You can go to college later, after you get some experience in the real world." Though the recruiter had ulterior motives of signing up more prospects, Daniel was ready to go. After basic training in Biloxi, Mississippi, he requested a transfer and began jungle warfare school. He was attached to the 25th Army Division, and he loved it. He began to excel and knew exactly how much he needed to drink to remain hydrated. He knew what he would carry with him and was one of the few who never missed PT. His specialized training helped him advance to the point where he was offered an opportunity to join a covert ops team to serve as the jungle specialist. It wasn't just his stamina and training. He had an uncanny ability to sneak up quietly and listen in on conversations just outside the target area. Once, during training exercises, he snuck up close enough to swipe a codebook from the opposing team's captain. He brought it back to his team leader, and his CO had recommended Daniel for the new elite squad position. Once he had joined Task Force Delta, his rise through the Joe ranks moved his career along. He was able to run recon missions in various locations, and he was excited to be assigned to the rainforests of Brazil. It was there he encountered a tribe known as the Tucaru. The Tucaru people had long distrusted those outside their tribe, but he brought gifts, asking nothing in return. And when he did finally ask a favor, it was whether someone could teach him their language. No one had ever asked this before. He was able to make maps and charts, but the jungle was more than land and landmarks to him. It was becoming his home. Because of the success of his reconnaissance missions, his fellow soldiers nicknamed him Recondo. That suited him just fine. Daniel LeClaire of Wheaton was beginning to fade. Recondo of G.I. Joe was beginning to rise. We hope you enjoyed this Recondo backstory read for you by the author, Yorktown Joe. Yo Joe. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.